The Book of Enoch lists every being that came down to earth, and the one that never left. A fragment of parchment no bigger than a business card sits in Vault 7B at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. Catalog number 4, Q203. 12 lines of Aramaic, carbon dated to 150 BCE, preserved 2,000 years in a desert cave. It is not on display. It sits behind a classification most researchers never think to search. What those 12 lines contain is the reason the Book of Enoch was removed from the Bible by the Council of Laodicea in 364 CE and stayed out for 17 centuries, not because it was false, because it was specific. It named beings. It recorded what each one did. It listed who was imprisoned and where. And it identified one category of being that received no sentence, no archangel, no removal order. A category assigned to Earth permanently with no closing date. That fragment is the beginning of a catalog. In the next several minutes, you will see every name on the list, every crime, every sentence, and the one entry that has never been closed. If forbidden biblical history is what you are here for, subscribe now and hit the bell. Every week, this channel goes directly to the catalog numbers, the archived field notes, and the peer-reviewed footnotes that never make it into the mainstream conversation. When archaeologists uncovered the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran in 1947, 11 separate copies of Enoch surfaced in the caves. More copies than were found of Deuteronomy, more than Exodus, more than most books that stayed in the Old Testament. Fragment 4, Q203, is part of the oldest surviving physical record of the text. The complete version exists in the Ge'ez manuscripts held by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church at Aksum, manuscripts preserved there for more than 400 years. Dr. Michael Knibb, who produced the standard Oxford translation in 1978, noted that the Book of the Watchers, the oldest section of Enoch, is not written in the language of allegory. Enoch writes in first-person past tense, describing locations he says he visited. Chapter 18:11 records his words. I saw there 7 stars like great burning mountains, and they cried out to me. Verse 14 specifies these are angels punished for violating a divine command. Chapter 21:10 gives the depth. 70,000 leagues downward from the place where heaven and earth meet. A league in ancient reckoning is approximately 3 miles. 70,000 leagues is 210,000 miles. The Earth's core sits at roughly 4,000 miles down. The text is a catalog. It begins with the first entry. 200 beings descended from heaven to the summit of Mount Hermon. The text names the mountain specifically, and notes that the name the Aramaic text uses for the oath sworn there derives from the same root as the mountain's name. 200 beings bound themselves by a mutual curse. If any broke from the plan, all would share the punishment. Chapter 6-3 identifies the leader as Shemiaza. They descend. They take human women as wives. The result is what Chapter 7 calls the Nephilim, the giants of Genesis 6-4. Chapter 8 opens the knowledge transfer record. The text describes this not as teaching, but as transmitting what was not supposed to be transmitted. The first entry is Azazel, identified as the chief of the fallen. He taught men to make swords, knives, shields, and breastplates, and acquainted them with the metals of the earth. He taught women the arts of ornamentation and cosmetics. The weapons and the cosmetics appear together as a paired set, the two instruments most reliably used to corrupt judgment. Chapter 69 continues the register. Barakel taught astrology. Kokabeel taught the constellations. Ezekiel taught weather prediction. Arakiel taught geology and the reading of minerals. Shamsiel taught solar cycles and timekeeping. Sariel taught lunar phases and calendars. Asaridel taught orbital mechanics. Tomiel taught the structure of the cosmos. Penemu taught writing with ink and paper, literacy itself listed as forbidden knowledge. Gadriel taught the full manufacture of weapons of war. Dangel taught augury. Kazdasia taught the smiting of spirits. Each name corresponds to a domain. Each entry reads like a case file. Domain assigned. Knowledge transferred. Crime committed. Prisoner identified. Dr. Margaret Barker, former president of the Society for Old Testament Study, published a paper in 2008 noting that R.H. Charles, in his 1906 English translation, rendered these names as proper nouns stripped of semantic content. In the original Ge'ez and Aramaic, these are functional descriptors. Azazel means God strengthens. Shemiaza means the name has seen. Barakel means lightning of God. The text is not cataloging individuals, it is cataloging positions. Now the sentencing record, chapter 10, verse 4. The archangel Raphael is commanded to bind Azazel hand and foot and cast him into darkness at Dudiel, a region in the Judean wilderness. He is to be covered with jagged rocks and left there until the day of judgment. Chapter 10, verse 11. The archangel Michael is told to bind Shemiyaza and his associates for 70 generations beneath the earth. 70 generations in ancient Jewish reckoning equals approximately 2,100 years. The binding occurred before the flood. By that calculation, the sentence should have concluded around the 1st century CE. The text does not record what happens when it ends. Chapter 21 describes where the sentenced beings are held. Enoch was brought to a place of terrible darkness and saw 7 stars bound there physically. Chapter 21-7 uses the Ge'ez term mekanas, meaning place of binding, a word appearing elsewhere only in contexts of physical restraint. Chapter 18, verse 9. The walls beneath the ocean floor are stones of hail, ice compressed under pressure, white and translucent. The floor is dark basalt, smooth and cold. Fire burns along the perimeter walls without melting the ice. Outside, pillars of superheated water rise from vents. The door is set into the ice wall facing away from the vents. Enoch reaches toward it. The angel Uriel stops him. "Do not touch it, Doctor." Ephraim Isaac, who translated the Ethiopian Ge'ez text for Oxford in 1983, noted that Western editions consistently shortened the spatial description in chapter 21 because it described relationships inconsistent with terrestrial geography. The full Ge'ez passage states that beyond the 4 hollow compartments, Enoch was taken to a place where 7 stars burned like mountains, and an angel told him, "This is the place of completion of heaven and earth, a prison for the stars and the powers of heaven who transgressed before their appointed times." Isaac marked this as the most physically specific description of angelic imprisonment in any ancient Jewish source. The Ge'ez text adds one detail the standard English editions strip out entirely. The door has no handle on the outside. It can only be opened from within. Now the entry that explains why the church removed Enoch. Chapter 15-8 states that the spirits of the Nephilim shall be evil spirits upon the earth, and evil spirits shall they be called. These are the spirits of beings produced by the union of the Watchers and human women who died in the flood. Their bodies are gone. But the text does not send their spirits to any of the 4 compartments holding the dead. Chapter 16-1 continues. As for the spirits of the giants which do oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth, these spirits shall rise up against the children of men because they have proceeded from them. Read the structure. No sentence, no archangel assigned, no imprisonment location, no duration. The text assigns them to earth. The grammatical construction used for that assignment appears elsewhere in Enoch only when describing conditions without a specified end. Every other class of being in the catalog has a closing mechanism. Azazel awaits the day of judgment. Shemiyaza's 70 generations have a calculable end. The beings beneath the ocean are sealed by a pre-creation oath, but the spirits of the Nephilim have no closing mechanism, no archangel, no prison. No end date except the final consummation of all things. The Council of Laodicea in 364 CE moved to exclude Enoch. Canon 60 prohibits texts that name the angels held in punishment and describe the places of their binding. The stated concern was doctrinal. Naming and locating angelic prisoners made the framework too concrete. The deeper problem is chapters 15 and 16. A church teaching that the spiritual realm was under divine authority could not accommodate a passage stating that a class of beings had been assigned to earth with no authority governing their removal. Augustine argued such passages should be read as moral allegory. Jerome, compiling the Latin Vulgate around 400 CE, wrote that Enoch made claims about angelic prisons with coordinates. The Ethiopian church kept Enoch. The Ge'ez manuscripts at Axum preserved what Rome chose to bury. The catalog does not end with Enoch. 2 other ancient traditions preserved a record from different angles. Both point to the same unresolved question those chapters leave open. The limestone block in the basement of the Cairo Museum has not been on public display since 1973. It is cataloged as JE 89289. Carved with a hieroglyphic register that does not match any known scene from the standard Egyptian religious canon, it was removed from public access. The same year, a visiting epigrapher from the University of Chicago photographed its carved surface and noted that the beings depicted had no equivalence in any dynastic text she had encountered in 20 years of fieldwork. That note exists. The photograph exists. The block exists. What does not exist is a single peer-reviewed paper dedicated to what is carved on it. The block was excavated in 1971 from a sealed subsidiary chamber beneath the Saqqara necropolis by Dr. Jean-Philippe Lauer, a French Egyptologist who spent more than 7 decades at the site. His field notes, held at the French National Center for Scientific Research in Paris, described the chamber as predating the surrounding step pyramid complex not by years but by centuries. The Cairo Museum cataloged the block in 1974 as pre-dynastic ceremonial relief, provenance uncertain. No dedicated iconographic study has been published since. The beings depicted on JE 89289 are labeled with a compound hieroglyphic glyph, provisionally translated as "those who came before the counting of years." In hieroglyphic convention, compound glyphs of that grammatical construction are precise categorical designations, not poetic flourishes. This glyph does not appear in the formal dynastic canon. The carved register depicts a construction sequence showing figures directing the placement of large stone forms using instruments not found in the documented Egyptian archaeological record. One recurs throughout, a rod with a forked terminus held at a precise downward angle. In 2000, German archaeologist Dr. Klaus Schmidt published field documentation from Göbekli Tepe, a ritual complex in southeastern Turkey predating the Egyptian pyramid complex by at least 7,000 years. Among its carved limestone pillars, Schmidt documented Pillar 43, which carries one recurring abstract element, a forked rod held at a downward angle by a figure rendered without a head. He classified it as an unidentified cultic implement. There is no evidence he was ever aware of JE 89289. In 2017, geologist Dr. Robert Schoch presented an analysis at the annual meeting of the Geological Society of America. The forked rod on Pillar 43 is rendered in every instance at a consistent downward angle of 33 degrees from horizontal. The forked implement on JE 89289 in Cairo appears at the same angle, 33 degrees, 2 sites, 7,000 years and 2,000 kilometers of separation. The same instrument at the same angle with no known cultural transmission pathway. In 2019, a genomics team led by Dr. Eske Willerslev at the University of Copenhagen published a landmark ancient DNA study in Nature Communications, covering 166 individuals from pre-dynastic and early dynastic Egyptian burial sites. Its findings on migration patterns were widely reported. What was not reported was a data point in the supplementary material. Table S7. 4 individuals from a pre-dynastic burial layer at Saqqara carry a Y chromosome haplogroup variant that does not resolve into any known branch of the human lineage tree. The authors flagged it in a single line. Low confidence call. Possible sequencing artifact. No follow-up analysis was conducted. The 4 individuals remain unresolved. The burial layer they came from sits directly beneath the subsidiary chamber where Lauer's team found the carved block in 1971. 3 lines of evidence. Architectural iconography. Geometric cross-site correspondence. Genomic material without a lineage address. All 3 converging on the same location, the same stratigraphic layer, the same unresolved category. The tablet was found on a Tuesday in October 1924, 12 feet below the surface of a dig site in southern Iraq. The man holding the brush when it emerged was not Leonard Woolley. It was a junior excavator named Tariq Farouk who had worked the same quadrant for 6 weeks and found nothing more remarkable than shards and ash. He set the tablet on a tray without looking at it. Woolley picked it up an hour later and did not set it down again for 40 minutes. What made Woolley go still was the script. Every other tablet from that layer was written in a form of Sumerian his team could read. This one was not. The symbols were older by centuries. A tablet written in a script that predated the civilization it was buried inside was not a thing that should exist. Woolley called it the Anzu fragment in his field notes. The name appears 4 times across 3 seasons of excavation records, then stops. The tablet does not appear in any published catalog from the excavations. It is not in the British Museum. It is not in the Iraq Museum. No accession number has ever been assigned to it. A photograph taken by Woolley's assistant shows a clay tablet on a linen cloth, partially obscured by shadow with a caption reading, "Not for reproduction." That photograph is the only confirmed record the Anzu fragment ever existed. The first person known to have translated any portion of it was a linguist at the Oriental Institute named Harold Spicer. In 1938, he received a rubbing through a private channel he never identified and spent 18 months on it. His notes survive under a folder marked Miscellaneous Correspondence, containing 12 pages of partial translation, diagrams of astronomical configurations, and a single sentence in the margin of the final page in an agitated hand. If this date is correct, it has already been set. He published nothing and retired in 1949. The folder was not discovered until Marta Holub, a graduate student cataloging unclaimed materials in 1987, found it misfiled behind a cabinet. She spent 4 years cross-referencing Spicer's partial translation against every known corpus of Proto-Sumerian script. The script matched none of them cleanly and borrowed from all of them simultaneously. In a monograph circulated to 11 colleagues in 1991, she described it as a synthesis of written forms that had not yet converged at the time they were supposedly in use separately. Her monograph was never published. She left academic life in 1993 and died in 2011, having asked that her research not be discussed. What survives of the Anzu fragment's content comes from three sources: Spicer's partial notes, Holub's monograph, and a translation completed in 2021 by Dr. Nadia Voss at the Free University of Berlin. Voss spent 6 years reconstructing the full text from photographs of Spicer's original rubbing that Holub had included in the copies she sent to colleagues. Voss estimates she recovered approximately 70% of the original. The remaining 30% occupies the lower third of the tablet, where the clay compressed unevenly before firing. What the recovered 70% contains is not what anyone expected. The text is written entirely in past tense. Every event it describes is framed as something the author witnessed, survived, and recorded for a reader who would come after. The great corpus of celestial divination tablets from Mesopotamia uses conditional grammar. If the moon is surrounded by a halo, the king will die. The Anzu fragment uses no conditional constructions at all. Its grammar is testimony. The author is not forecasting. The author is remembering. The text describes a series of observable changes that preceded a specific event the author calls, in Voss's translation, the day the upper deep opened. The Sumerian compound is an Abzu Bala. An is sky. Abzu is the primordial deep. Bala means to turn over, to invert, to open from below upward. The sky does not open from above, it opens from beneath. Whatever the author witnessed came through a boundary that failed from the inside out. The observable changes number 9 in the surviving text. The first, water rising without rain. The Sumerian is Aki, groundwater coming upward, fields absorbing nothing. Terrain stable for generations, becoming soft without weather to explain it. Sinkholes appearing without rainfall preconditions have increased in documented frequency by more than 200% since 2000. The second, birds flying without direction, moving against the season, some falling from clear sky. Disruptions to migratory bird navigation are attributed to geomagnetic field fluctuation. The 3rd through 7th signs describe progressive failures in directional instruments, atmospheric pressure, instability, unusual luminosity at the horizon without a solar source, deep ground vibration detectable without equipment, and standing water briefly agitated without wind or tremor. The 8th sign, the protection above is torn, and the fire from beyond reaches the ground. The European Space Agency Swarm mission, launched in 2013 to monitor the geomagnetic field, has tracked the growth of what researchers call the South Atlantic Anomaly, a region of severely weakened magnetic shielding stretching from southern Africa across the Atlantic to South America. The anomaly is growing and has split into 2 lobes. Satellites passing through it experience unexplained electronic failures at a rate 3 times higher than elsewhere in their orbital paths. The 9th sign, the sky binding reaches its null threshold. The Sumerian word is nanasu. Voss translates it as the null, the between state, the moment of no direction. Every directional instrument the author describes becomes simultaneously active and meaningless, pointing everywhere at once. Then a silence. Not the absence of sound, but the cessation of the low-frequency vibration the Earth produces as a geomagnetically active body. When that vibration stops, you know the binding is at 0. 8 of the 9 signs appear in the geological and observational record. The 9th is present tense. Active, growing. After the 9 signs, the Anzu fragment gives a date. The text describes Earth as having 2 kinds of motion, daily rotation and a slower second rotation governing the pole star's position over a much longer period. This is the precession of the equinoxes, the 26,000-year cycle. Hipparchus of Nicaea is credited with discovering precession in 127 BCE. The Anzu fragment predates that discovery by somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 years and describes the mechanism with enough precision that Voss used the star positions in the text to confirm the tablet's age independently of its radiocarbon dating. The tablet describes a point in this precessional cycle at which the rotation of the pole combines with a weakening of the sky binding, and a specific celestial conjunction becomes active. Venus, Mars, and the Moon must align within 1 degree of a specific star in the constellation the Babylonians called Mushusu, the dragon, in what modern astronomy maps as Draco. That 3-body conjunction within 1 degree of a single point in Draco occurs by Voss's calculation, using current ephemeris data, once every 4,700 years. The previous occurrence was approximately 2900 BCE. The next occurs in March 2029. The alignment lasts 6 hours and 14 minutes. The tablet specifies the configuration with enough precision that Voss could pinpoint it to the 14th of March 2029, beginning at 1922 UTC. A text written 5,000 years ago named an astronomical event accurate to the hour. The tablet does not say the conjunction causes the opening. It says the conjunction is the moment the opening that has already been developing becomes complete. The chamber where the Anzu fragment was found was sealed from the inside. Woolley noted this in the leather-bound personal journal he kept throughout the excavations, not in the official field notes that went to institutional archives. That record passed to his niece, and then to a university library in Edinburgh, catalogued in 1978, without any understanding of what it contained. The relevant entry is dated the 14th of October 1924. Woolley writes that the clay sealing the chamber entrance had been applied from within, and that there was no mechanism by which a person who had applied it from within could have exited afterward. Someone went into that chamber and did not come out. The flood layer above that chamber is dated by 3 independent radiocarbon analyses to approximately 2900 BCE. The tablet ends with a single line. Voss marks it as the only passage she is fully confident in because the symbols are large, deeply pressed, and show none of the compression damage affecting the rest of the lower section. She translates it as, "You already know what this is. You have seen the signs. The only question left is what you will do in the 3 days while the boundary is open." 3 separate traditions, 3 separate geographic locations. 3 textual corpuses produced across several thousand years, with no documented contact between them. Enoch catalogs every being that descended to Earth, their crimes, their domains of forbidden knowledge, their sentences, their imprisonment locations. Every entry has a closing mechanism. Azazel awaits the day of judgment. Shemiaz's 70 generations have a computable end. The beings beneath the ocean are sealed by a pre-creation oath. Every entry except one. Chapters 15 and 16 assign the spirits of the Nephilim to Earth permanently, with no archangel, no prison, no end date except the final consummation of all things. The Egyptians recorded beings who preceded their civilization, beings their compound glyph identifies as those who came before the counting of years, beings whose biological traces appear in a pre-dynastic burial layer below the oldest sealed chamber at Saqqara. They built their monumental civilization at a site that already held significance, inherited rather than created, and documented it on a limestone block they sealed underground. The Babylonian author of the Anzu fragment sealed a tablet in a chamber in 2900 BCE, calculated the precise astronomical configuration next occurring on the 14th of March 2029 at 1922 UTC, and left one sentence for whoever came after. The catalog in Vault 7B at the Israel Museum is incomplete. One entry has no removal order. One category of being was assigned to Earth with no closing mechanism. The Egyptians built at the site where the previous record of those beings was sealed. The Babylonian author buried a date for the next time the conditions recur. 3 traditions. 1 open entry, 1 approaching date. The catalog exists. The gap in it was not an oversight.